guys. I hope you've been having a great week. I miss you. I am going to continue reading They Came to Worthington, A Family Adventure. If you remember yesterday, I had just started chapter 5, and Mama had just said there's no door on their new house. Of course not, Papa said. We'll hang a coverlet in the doorway and put oily paper at the window. We'll make it real snug. Mama sighed. Well, anyway, it doesn't bounce you around like a covered wagon, and it stays in the same place every day. Papa carried the feathered pillows from the wagon and laid them carefully on some clean hay in the cabin. There was just time that night to build a fire in the fireplace, with its chimney made of mud and sticks. Soon the Morrisons, the Thompsons, and several other families came bringing food for the Talbots' supper. They were full of questions about their journey. Had they noticed how the first wagons had winded the trail for them? Had they seen the Kilbournes? It's the first time in a month and a half that we've slept in a home of our own, Mama said as they unloaded the wagon. When you say your prayers tonight, children, be sure to give thanks for our safe journey. 5 very tired but very happy Talbots fell asleep in front of the hearth that night. Sarah even felt a little lonely without her friend Polly, who had joined her own family in their cabin. The next few days were spent settling in. Papa unloaded the wagon, Mama and Sarah arranged their dishes and cooking pots. Some of the good dishes had been broken, and Mama missed the beautiful polished wood case that housed the works of her clock. Papa had built a small loft under the roof of the cabin. When Hannah and Jed saw it, they covered its floor with straw and put their feathers there. Then they announced that the loft was their very own. The Talbots were able to borrow supplies from the Griswolds until Papa could take the wagon into Franklinton to buy flour, salt, and perhaps sugar and molasses. On Friday, much to their surprise, the Kilbournes' wagon arrived. How many of the settlers are here? Mr. Kilbourne asked as he climbed down from his wagon. 12 families, sir, and of course the bachelors who stayed on during the summer to build the cabins for us, Papa told him. That will be enough for a worship service. We'll gather in the meeting house on Sunday morning for services, Mr. Kilbourne announced. In addition to being the leader of the group, Mr. Kilbourne was a deacon in the church. The Sunday church, which everyone attended, lasted 3.5 hours. Hannah and Jed thought it was going to last forever. They wiggled on the crude benches which served as pews. After church, there's nothing to do because we have to be quiet, Jed complained. That's the way it should be, Mama frowned. You two are spoiled from being too long on the trail without church services. You have become used to Papa reading the Bible around the campfire at night and traveling on Sunday like heathens. No more complaints. Sunday is the day of rest. Mr. Kilbourne had announced at Sunday service that since all of the families had arrived, school would soon start in the meeting house. Sitting all day Sunday and now school to worry about, Jed was disgusted. I thought things would be different from the way they were in Berlin. Not that different, boy, Papa laughed. Say, did any of you realize that the church service this morning was the first service in this part of the country? Back in Connecticut, we could never be elected to public office. One had to belong to the Congregational Church. We will be free to worship as we wish here in Ohio. Before the first big snow, Mr. Phelps, the school teacher, fixed the meeting house for school. He had his desks in the middle of the large room. Hannah and Jed and the other children sat around him on low benches. Mr. Phelps had only one book. Mr. Phelps had the only book. After reading the lesson, he would question the children on what they had heard. Without books of their own, the children learned by the rote method. They repeated facts or memorized poetry or lists of dates. Instead of written tests, the children showed they had remembered their lesson by reciting in front of the teacher and the class. Can you guys imagine if we, as teachers, said something and then you had to recite everything back word for word, and that's how we knew. Either you learned it or you didn't. Could you stand up and recite it back to us? That would be pretty different. Hannah and Jed learned their numbers by writing with a sharp stone on a smooth piece of slate that could be found in great quantities on the banks of the Whetstone River. Even Jed had to admit it was good to be learning again. The autumn was a busy time with much work to be done. The time seemed to fly by, and before long there was talk of Christmas coming. The week before Christmas, Papa organized a deer hunt. The men with long rifles and the boys who were strong enough to shoulder the heavy rifles took to the woods to hunt for deer. There would be much feasting at Christmas, and the women would be making mince meat and puddings. 2 days before Christmas, a wagon came up from Franklinton to deliver several boxes of books. This great occasion was the start of a community library. Many of the books had been purchased with money that was a gift from Dr. Jonas Stanberry. Remember, he was the man who sold the Liberty Township land to our Scioto Company, Papa told the family. "Oh, Matt, how exciting," said Sarah, who never seemed to get enough reading. "With more people coming here all the time, there might not be enough books to go around, and now I can read all I want to." On Christmas Day, there were church services led by Mr. Kilborn. More sitting still, as Jed put it. But the day after Christmas was the day of celebration by the Scioto Company. Everyone in the settlement had been looking forward to this. The huge meal was served in the meeting house at noon, with enough venison for all, and puddings and cakes with maple syrup and sweets that were brought from Chillicothe. After dinner, the women talked as they carried the dishes away and cleaned the tables. The men brought their pipes and talked of their plans for next spring, while the children played games. But when Mr. Kilborn got up to speak, everyone quieted down, even the children. "I have asked 9 of the men to toast our new settlement, and when they have finished, I will present a toast." The crowd cheered, each man in turn, as he rose to wish wealth and prosperity to all. Then it was quiet once again as they waited for James Kilborn. He rose from his place at the head of the table. "Hear ye, with all in this hall. The President of the Honorable Assembly of the State of Ohio has published our petition and granted our request for an act of incorporation in the name of Worthington. The name Worthington will be the name of our worthy friend and benefactor, Thomas Worthington of Chillicothe." That was chapter 5. I am going to go ahead and start on chapter 6, and we will just go ahead and get started. Really quick though, for chapter 5, the kids started their school. I want you to think for a second, maybe pause my video, turn and talk to somebody that's around you, or just even think to yourself, how is their school different than how you guys go to school? Think about that, maybe talk to somebody. All right, I'm going to start chapter 6. A cause for celebration. Polly Morrison stood before the hearth of the cabin as the firelit reflected in her shining eyes on a new dress. It would be worn for the first time for her wedding to Abner Pinney, and from then on only for special occasions. She and Sarah had spent days on sewing the rose-colored fabric she had purchased in Easttown. Her mother had given her a gold pin to wear on the lace collar she had bought in Shippensburg. "Lovisa, are you sure it hangs straight all the way around?" "For the 10th time, Polly." "Yes," Mama sighed. "After the way you two have been sewing for a month and a half, it should be just about perfect." Just then, Papa came in the door, which was now a real door and not a coverlet. "Polly, you are going to be a beautiful bride. Now you ladies get into your coats. It's a cold February afternoon, and the folks are beginning to gather in the meeting house." Mama called up towards the loft. "Come along, Jedediah." "Coming, Mama," Jed answered reluctantly. A wedding was not exactly the way the boy wanted to spend a whole afternoon. Sarah left to go to the Morrison cabin with Polly, and the rest of the Talbot family walked across the clearing through the February snow toward the meeting house. People were arriving, and everyone was in a happy mood. It was to be the first wedding in Worthington, and a double wedding at that. Papa, Mama, Jed, and Hannah took seats on one of the front benches in the large room, while Sarah stayed in back with Polly. Polly stood beside the door with Charlotte Beach, who was to be married that same day to Levi Penny. Zachariah Stevenson, who had been appointed Justice of the Peace, would perform the ceremony. When Squire Stevens nodded his head towards the two couples, they came slowly forward and stood quietly as the vows were read. As soon as the final "I pronounce you man and wife" was repeated, both couples embraced and the celebrating began. Benches were moved to the side of the room and tables were spread with food contributed by all the families. Jed said it was just like Christmas all over again. He decided that weddings weren't so bad after all. All afternoon there was dancing and talking and visiting. Sarah was smiling as she danced with Polly's brother. At dusk, the guests began to congratulate the two couples again and to leave. Mama and Papa rounded up Hannah and Jed and started to leave. Sarah had tears in her eyes as she kissed Polly goodbye. "Sari, for goodness sake," Papa chimed in. "You would think Polly was going far away. She'll be right here, and you'll be seeing her every day." "Goodbye, Mrs. Penny," Hannah said deliberately. "Bless you, my dear," blushed Polly. "You're the first one to call me that. I will have to get used to that." Soon it was spring, with everyone busy with planting. Then it was summer, and before long there was talk of a 4th of July celebration. "Please help me pull this heavy branch onto the pile, Jed," Hannah called. "It's too heavy for me." Together, Hannah and Jed pulled the last big branches to the side of the clearing. The men were piling up the clearing brush to make room for the rows of logs that were to be used for seats for tomorrow's 4th of July celebration. For the last several days, everyone had worked to help in felling trees to make the clearing larger. Now Worthington would have a proper village green. "That's the last of it," Papa called to the other men. "Let's get those logs lined up and we'll be all ready for tomorrow." "Do you know what I'm going to miss most about tomorrow?" Jed asked Hannah as they walked to their cabin. "Yes, I think I do. Oh, we'll have speeches and games all day in the clearing. But the part I liked the most about 4th of July in Berlin was waking up to the sound of the cannon." So in chapter 6, they started to celebrate many things. They had 2 weddings, it was spring, now they are getting ready for 4th of July. So I want you guys to think, what is your favorite celebration? It can either be in the past, something you're remembering. It can be something that you do every year and it's a tradition. Or maybe it's something you're looking forward to. But I want you to think about what your favorite type of celebration is. I will be back tomorrow and we will finish up chapter 6 and start chapter 7. All right, thank you for listening. Bye, guys.